So, Max, I was trying to solve this complex chemistry problem yesterday with one of those AI assistants, and it just kept suggesting the same three tools over and over.
Let me guess, none of them actually helped you solve the problem?
Exactly. It was like trying to fix a quantum computer with a hammer and screwdriver. The tools were just too static.
That's the fundamental problem with AI systems in science today. They're limited by their predefined toolsets, which is precisely what today's paper addresses.
Welcome to another episode of Totally Unprofessional Peer Review. I'm Casey Park, your developer host who's obsessed with structure and flow.
And I'm Max Stone, the theorist who keeps Casey honest about metrics and methodology.
Today, we're diving into a fascinating paper titled Beyond Static Tools, Test Time Tool Evolution for Scientific Reasoning. It's tackling one of the biggest challenges in AI for science.
This paper introduces something called test time tool evolution, or TTE, which is a paradigm shift in how AI agents interact with tools. Instead of being limited to predefined tools, these systems can actually synthesize and evolve new tools during inference.
The authors have also created a benchmark called SciEvo with over 1,500 scientific reasoning tasks to evaluate this approach. It's like giving AI the ability to not just use tools, but to invent new ones on the fly.
Imagine if your smartphone could create entirely new apps whenever it encountered a problem it couldn't solve with existing ones.
That would be incredible and slightly terrifying.
Well, stick around to find out if we should be excited or concerned about AI systems that can evolve their own computational toolkit. This could change everything about how AI approaches scientific problems.
Let's start by exploring why static tool libraries are so limiting for scientific AI reasoning.
It's a fundamental mismatch with how science actually works. Science is open-ended and constantly evolving, while these static tool libraries are rigid and finite.
Exactly. When scientists encounter new problems, they don't just pick from existing tools, they modify existing methods or create entirely new ones.
And that's the big innovation in this paper. Test time tool evolution allows AI to do what human scientists do naturally: adapt and create tools specific to the problem in hand.
So, Max, let's dig deeper into why these static tool libraries are such a problem for scientific AI. The paper mentions that tools in scientific domains are sparse, heterogeneous, and intrinsically incomplete. What does that actually mean in practice?
Great question. In science, we're constantly working with specialized tools for very specific problems. Think about it. A tool that works perfectly for quantum mechanics might be completely useless for biochemistry. And there's just no way to pre-build every possible tool that might be needed across all scientific domains.
Right, and I imagine the long tail problem is huge here. Like, you could build tools for the most common 80% of problems, but that remaining 20% contains thousands of edge cases that each need their own specialized tools.
Exactly. And the paper actually gives us a great visualization of this problem. Take a look at this comparison between the traditional static tool paradigm and their proposed test time tool evolution approach.
Wow, this is really clear. On the left side, we see the current approach. You have a fixed collection of pre-built tools that are manually updated, and there's no way to generate new tools at runtime. That leads to poor adaptation to new problems.
And notice how the static paradigm has this big red X on no runtime tool generation. That's the fundamental limitation they're addressing. When a new scientific problem comes up that doesn't match any existing tool, the system just hits a wall.
While their approach on the right has this self-evolving loops that can generate, validate, and update tools on the fly. That's a game changer for scientific applications.
The paper also emphasizes that the central challenge of AI for science isn't just reasoning, it's the ability to create computational methods in an open-ended scientific world. Static tools fundamentally can't do that.
And it's not just about the quantity of tools either. Let's look at this chart showing the distribution of tools across scientific domains in their benchmark.
This is fascinating. You can see how tools are distributed across physics, chemistry, material science, and mathematics. Each slice represents different specialized subdomains.
Physics alone takes up 54% of the tools. And look at all those subdomains: quantum mechanics, thermodynamics, fluid mechanics. each requiring their own specialized computational methods.
And chemistry at 22%, math at 18%, it really drives home how heterogeneous the tool landscape is. No static library could realistically cover all these domains comprehensively.
Let's also look at how their system handles this complexity. This diagram shows their approach to dynamic tool synthesis.
This is where it gets interesting. See how they break down complex scientific problems into sub-goals? In this example, they're calculating energy transfer in iron, which requires multiple specialized computational steps.
And if a needed tool doesn't exist, the system can actually synthesize one. That's what the tool synthesizer component does. It's addressing exactly the limitation we've been discussing.
The results speak for themselves too. Look at this performance comparison between their test time tool evolution approach and other methods.
Wow, their TTE0 method is significantly outperforming other approaches like KTCE, Creator, and KMetagent across all benchmarks. The numbers aren't even close.
And here's another interesting chart showing how tool availability affects performance.
So this is comparing different models with varying numbers of tools available: 100, 200, 5D, and 500 tools. And even with more tools, the static approaches still underperform compared to methods that can synthesize new tools.
Exactly. It shows that just adding more static tools isn't the solution. The ability to dynamically create new tools is what really drives performance improvements.
I think we should also mention some of the challenges with this approach. The paper acknowledges that generating tools at runtime has higher computational costs and latency compared to just selecting from existing tools.
Good point. There are also safety concerns with generating and executing arbitrary code, and the whole approach depends heavily on the underlying language model's ability to write correct code.
But despite those limitations, the paper makes a compelling case that moving beyond static tool libraries is essential for scientific AI. The traditional approach of predefined tools just doesn't match how science actually works.
Absolutely. As they put it, the central challenge is the ability to create computational methods in an open-ended scientific world. And that requires tools that can evolve alongside the problems they're trying to solve.
So, shall we move on to how their test time tool evolution paradigm actually works in practice?
Let's do it. I'm particularly interested in how they handle the verification process for newly synthesized tools.
So now that we understand why static tool libraries are so limiting, let's dive into the main innovation of this paper: test time tool evolution. Max, what exactly is TTE?
At its core, test time tool evolution is a paradigm shift that transforms tools from fixed resources into problem-driven artifacts that can be created on demand. Let's take another look at that comparison diagram to understand the difference.
Right, so on the right side of this diagram, we see their TTE approach has this self-evolving loops that can generate, validate, and update tools during runtime. That's fundamentally different from the static paradigm.
Exactly. And notice how they describe it as a unified evolutionary inference process. The key innovation is that tool creation happens during the actual problem-solving process, not beforehand.
I see that they've also highlighted runtime generation, self-evolving updates, and high adaptation as the benefits of this approach. That's in stark contrast to the fixed collection, manual updates, and poor adaptation of the static paradigm.
The paper formalizes TTE for two primary tasks: TTE 0 for creating tools from scratch when there's no initial library, and TTE adapt for taking existing tools and adapting them to new domains.
That's fascinating. So TTE0 could literally start with an empty toolbox and build what it needs on the fly? That's incredibly powerful.
Precisely. The paper states their architecture enables continuous library growth from an empty state while solving real-world problems. It's like having an AI scientist that can invent new experimental methods whenever needed.
Let's look at how this actually works in practice. The paper provides this detailed architecture diagram of their system.
This diagram is really comprehensive. You can see the whole process starts with structured task decomposition on the left, where they break down complex problems into manageable sub-goals.
Right, and in their example, they're calculating energy transfer in iron, which they've broken down into steps like converting temperature from Celsius to Kelvin and calculating entropy change.
Then in the middle section, we see dynamic tool retrieval, where the system first tries to find existing tools in its registry that might help solve these sub-goals.
And here's where it gets really interesting. If no suitable tool exists, it activates the tool synthesizer at the bottom right to create a new one. That's the key innovation that makes this different from static approaches.
Exactly. And they don't just create tools blindly. Notice the tool verifier component that checks if the newly synthesized tool actually works correctly before using it.
I also like how they have a redundancy checkers that prevents the system from creating duplicate tools. That's important for efficiency as the tool library grows over time.
And once a new tool is verified, it gets registered in the dynamic tool registries for future use. So the system is constantly learning and expanding its capabilities.
This is really impressive. It's like giving AI the ability to program itself with new capabilities whenever it encounters a problem it can't solve with existing tools.
The results are impressive too. Let's look at how TTE performs compared to other methods.
Wow, these numbers are striking. Their TTE0 method is outperforming all the other approaches across all the benchmarks they tested. For example, on the first benchmark at TRRR1, TTE0 scores 0.89 compared to just 0.43 for KeyMat Agent, which was the next best performer.
And look at the SciEvo benchmark, which is their own benchmark. TTE0 achieves 0.99 at TRR1, which is nearly perfect. The other methods aren't even close.
Let's also look at how tool availability affects performance. This chart shows an interesting comparison.
This chart compares three different models, Qwen 2.5, GPT-4o, and GPT 3.5 Turbo, with different numbers of tools available, 100, 250, and 500.
And for each model and tool count, they're comparing three approaches: no tool calls, gray, Q plus tools, blue, and S plus tools, red. The S plus tools approach, which I'm guessing incorporates some aspects of their synthesis method, consistently outperforms the others.
What's really interesting is that even as they increase the number of available tools from 100 to 500, the performance gap between the approaches remains. This suggests that just adding more static tools isn't enough. You need the ability to synthesize new ones.
So to summarize, test time tool evolution transforms AI agents from passive tool selectors to active tool creators. Instead of being limited by predefined tools, they can synthesize, verify, and evolve new tools during the actual problem-solving process.
Right, and the paper emphasizes that this mirrors how actual scientific research works. Scientists don't just select from existing methods, they create new ones when needed. TTE brings that same capability to AI systems.
I should mention that the paper does acknowledge some potential risks with this approach. Since the system is generating executable code, there are safety concerns, particularly in domains like chemistry, where code could potentially be misused.
Good point. They mentioned that their experiments were conducted in a sandboxed environment with timeout constraints, and they followed responsible disclosure practices to ensure no harmful tools were included in their released materials.
They also note that scaling this to real-world systems would require more robust safety verification beyond simple syntax checks. That makes sense. If you're letting AI write its own code, you need strong guardrails.
Absolutely. But despite those challenges, the benefits are clear. By enabling dynamic tool creation, TTE overcomes the fundamental limitations of static tool libraries and achieves much better performance on scientific reasoning tasks.
And it's not just about performance, it's about matching how science actually works. The paper describes science as an open-ended world, where computational methods need to evolve alongside the problems they're solving.
Exactly. They're shifting the paradigm from what tools do I have to what tools do I need, and then creating those tools on demand. It's a much more flexible and powerful approach.
Now I'm curious to see how they evaluate this approach with their SciEvo benchmark. Shall we move on to that section?
Let's do it. I'm particularly interested in how they design tasks that can meaningfully test an AI's ability to create and evolve computational tools.
Now let's talk about the SciEvo benchmark, a key contribution of this paper. The authors created this to specifically evaluate AI's ability to create and evolve computational tools.
This is really important because you need specialized benchmarks to properly test something as novel as test-time tool evolution. They couldn't just use existing benchmarks that were designed for static tool approaches.
Exactly. And the scale is impressive. SciEvo includes 5590 scientific reasoning tasks supported by 925 automatically evolved tools. That's a substantial dataset.
What makes SciEvo particularly interesting is how it was constructed. The paper mentions it has an evolutionary construction paradigm. The tools weren't curated from static code bases.
Right. They were bootstrapped from scratch using the TTE framework itself. So every tool in the benchmark was pragmatically generated to address real scientific reasoning needs.
Let's look again at that tool distribution chart to understand the scope of what SciEvo is covering.
This chart really shows the breadth of scientific domains in SciEvo. Physics makes up the largest portion at 54%, with chemistry at 22%, mathematics at 18%, and material science at 6%.
And within each domain, there are numerous specialized subfields. In physics alone, we see thermodynamics, quantum mechanics, electronics, fluid mechanics, and many others.
It's essentially a microcosm of the scientific tool landscape. By covering this diverse range of domains, SciEvo can test whether an AI system can truly adapt to the heterogeneous nature of scientific problems.
What's particularly valuable about this benchmark is that it's not just testing whether an AI can use existing tools, it's testing whether it can create new ones when needed.
And that's crucial because in real scientific research, you often need to develop new computational methods to solve novel problems. SciEvo is designed to evaluate exactly that capability.
The paper also mentions they use SciEvo alongside two other benchmarks, SciBench and SciEvo, to provide a comprehensive evaluation of their approach.
Let's look at those performance results again. The comparison across all three benchmarks is quite revealing.
This table shows the performance of different methods across SciBench, SciEvo, and SciEvo. The metrics are TRRT, TRRT, TRRTT, TRR210, which I'm guessing are measures of task resolution rate at different thresholds.
And their TTE0 method is absolutely dominating across all benchmarks. On SciEvo specifically, they achieve 0.99 for TRR1, which is nearly perfect performance.
Compare that to the next best performer on SciEvo, Chemitagen, which only achieves 0.62. That's a massive performance gap.
It's worth noting that SciEvo isn't just a benchmark, it's also a resource for the research community. The authors have released both the code and benchmark at their GitHub repository.
That's an important contribution. By making SciEvo publicly available, they're enabling other researchers to test and improve upon their approach.
I'm also impressed by their attention to safety concerns. They mention conducting a rigorous manual review of the entire evolved tool library before releasing it publicly.
Yes, they specifically note that they adhered to responsible disclosure practices and ensured no tools enabling harmful applications were included in the released artifacts.
That's particularly important given the potential dual-use risks they acknowledge, especially in domains like chemistry where code could potentially be misused.
Let's also look at that other chart showing how tool availability affects performance across different models.
This chart compares three different approaches across three models: GPT 3.5 Turbo, GPT-4o, and Qwen 2.5, with varying numbers of tools available.
The gray bars represent no tool call, the blue bars are Q+ tools, and the red bars are S+ tools. And what's striking is that the red bars, which I believe incorporate some aspect of their synthesis approach, consistently outperform the others.
And this pattern holds true regardless of how many tools are available: 100, 250, or 500. It really reinforces their central argument that dynamic tool synthesis is more important than just having a larger static tool library.
The paper also highlights that SciEvo enables effective cross-domain adaptation of computational tools. That's a key capability for scientific AI systems.
Right, because scientific breakthroughs often come from applying methods from one field to problems in another. Being able to adapt tools across domains is incredibly valuable.
To summarize, SciEvo serves multiple purposes. It's a comprehensive benchmark for evaluating tool evolution capabilities, a demonstration of the TTE approach in action, and a resource for the broader research community.
And the results speak for themselves. Their TTE approach dramatically outperforms existing methods on SciEvo, achieving near perfect performance on tasks that require dynamic tool creation and adaptation.
It's a significant step forward in scientific AI. By creating benchmarks like SciEvo, researchers can now systematically evaluate how well AI systems can create and evolve computational tools, a capability that's essential for true scientific reasoning.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this section, I think it's worth emphasizing that SciEvo isn't just measuring performance, it's measuring a fundamental capability that aligns with how human scientists actually work.
That's the key insight. Science isn't about selecting from a fixed menu of tools, it's about creating new methods when existing ones fall short. SciEvo is designed to evaluate exactly that kind of creative, adaptive reasoning.
So, shall we move on to our closing thoughts about this paper and its implications for the future of AI in science?
Let's do it. I think we've covered the key technical contributions, and now we can zoom out and discuss the broader impact.
As we wrap up today's discussion on test time tool evolution, I'm really struck by how this approach mirrors the creative process of actual scientific discovery. It's not just about having a bigger toolbox, it's about being able to invent new tools when you need them.
Absolutely. This paper represents a fundamental shift in how AI approaches scientific problems. By moving from static tool libraries to dynamic tool evolution, we're getting closer to AI systems that can truly participate in the scientific process rather than just executing predefined methods.
And while there are certainly challenges around computational efficiency and safety to address, the performance improvements are undeniable. This could dramatically accelerate scientific discovery in fields from quantum physics to materials science.
I think that's the key takeaway for our listeners. Test time tool evolution isn't just an incremental improvement in AI for science. It's potentially a paradigm shift that could fundamentally change how AI contributes to scientific progress.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Totally Unprofessional Peer Review. If you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to subscribe and join us next week when we'll be discussing emergent abilities in large language models.
And remember, in the world of AI tools, it's not the size of your library that matters, it's whether your model can evolve on the fly.